So, I know this will surprise none of you, but I started a fight last night on social media. And what do I mean? I, like many of you, I'm sure, are a part of a like groups that discuss things. On one, it's all about philosophy. I've mentioned it multiple times. That About philosophy and theology and just stuff like that. People discuss atheists, agnostics, and theists, and all these different groups. They'll discuss different topics and things. Um, Another one that I'm in is of writers, people that are either aspiring to be writers or that are working on narratives, that are trying to get kind of the pieces together to kind of. And so it's a large group. There's something like 10,000 people in it, and they'll um, talk about different things, um, how to start, end, and kind of get through the middle of scenes. What would things that would help their characters, like essentials of a character, essentials of a specific narrative in a genre, stuff. And in it, uh, I started seeing a lot of questions about like how do I start a love scene? What is important to a love scene or in a romance scene, things like that. And so I created a post specifically to address it. And it says three pieces of advice for people that are trying to put together a romance novel. The first, you don't need an explicit or a steamy, like dirty sex scene. You don't need it. That most of the time, when if it's in print or if it's on screen, it ends up being really awkward, voyeuristic, really clunky. They tend to do things in on screen or sex scenes that just they don't happen in reality, and it ends up being really weird. A lot of wish fulfillment. That it'd be better for you to follow the less is more principle. The second thing is no, not in the shower. That um, there's nothing romantic about a shower. Despite what like herbal essences and Axe body spray would have you believe that uh, these things, but simply like the idea of the steamy, hot, romantic, like spontaneous shower sex scene is something that really only exists in fiction and in like pornography. That's the only places where those exist, and that if you want to have a cohesive, strong narrative, you need to ground it in reality, and you need to rise above that kind of um, whatever, like that artificial cartooniness with your narrative. The third is that you need to show real love. That not all love is horizontal, and not all love is like the Nicholas Sparks Notebook cat fighting couples will do. It's indicative of a toxic relationship, not cute in any way. That no relationship is just boom into the sack with each other. Like that just doesn't happen. That real love, real romance occurs in the stretchy pants on the couch watching Netflix while you eat bowl of cereal at like 10 o'clock at night together. Like that, and that just making breakfast the following morning for somebody just because, and packing your loved one, your significant other's lunch for the next day, or bringing coffee to them in the middle of the afternoon. That's what love is. Just being nice to each other and kind to each other, being kind and nice to the people that they care about, eating ice cream off the same spoon, that kind of stuff. That's what real love is, and it's not always sexy and it's not always steamy like that, but it is something that um, will form like a greater foundation for if you're trying to have a long-lived relationship in your narrative, especially if you want like multiple books with the same couple in it or something like that. You need to have that little nuggets of, what do you want to say, gush, I guess, or whatever. Like, you need to have that instead, because that's what's going to sustain your narrative. The House of Cards, we're only together for our ambitions, just is not going to succeed. So I didn't think it was going to be, I mean, obviously there's going to be some controversy with it, but I just posted it. And what's interesting to me is that there was kind of 5 real main ways that there was response to it, or ways of responding to it. The first is that probably 2/3 of the response right off the bat was positive. People saying, yes, please don't give me garbage sex in my romance. I want real romance. People saying that, put the narrative first. Put the character development first, the character arc, the arc of their relationship ahead of that cheap sex in your writing. That it'll help you key in with your audience better. So there's that. The second form of response that I received is the don't tell other people what to do response. And I mean, my main question is, so does that apply to every circumstance? Or does that only apply when somebody is kind of attacking the sex idol of our society? And does it include you telling me not to tell other people what to do? Does it include that as well, and not telling what other people should do? So, hypocrisy aside, everyone knew the hypocrisy was coming. The second, or like the third form, and then the second form of kind of criticism was the ones that are that were saying things like, no, I live for sexual content. I live for the sex scenes. I live for the dirty and the raunchy and the steamy and that sort of thing. I live for those things, and so don't take them away from me, which I'll circle back around briefly. The fourth was the ad hominem everyone was kind of expecting would come to. How old are you? Are you even old enough to talk about sex? Are you... I'm sorry that your marriage is so boring. I'm sorry you've never experienced real sex before, or hot sex. Like, that kind of stuff, which, I mean, like I said, no one's surprised that was coming. Of course it was. And then fifth, which I'm going to bundle the third and the fifth together, the idea that don't take my sex away, my sexual content away, and the fifth, which is sex sells, and I want to sell books, so why shouldn't I take advantage of what sells in order to kind of ply my writing? And so both of those two categories brought up 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight in it, because they're the same narrative, everyone knows that. Just one is more adult, explicit than the other. The idea, like, if sex sells, which, I mean, Herbal Essences acts like that. If I inject sex into my marketing, if I inject sex into my TV show, Game of Thrones, pointless nudity, if I include those things with my narrative, then it'll be easier to sell it, because of the fact that you're taking advantage of something, or kind of leveraging something that people crave. And my response to that was this: 50 Shades of Grey, is that what you want your narrative, your story, to be compared to? Because, yes, it sold books, and even weird marketing and merchandising stuff like cookbooks out of nowhere, the feature films, stuff like, of course they were there, and it made a lot of money all of a sudden, but it didn't even touch, not even a drop in the water, like in a bucket, compared to the amount of money that, let's say, Lord of the Rings made. Obviously not a romance, but not even compared to Twilight, which was its kind of inspirational source material, which has really no sex in it, and it's just kind of a tease throughout all of it, and it's really awkward and really poorly written as well. But even compared to that, like, it still didn't make very much money. It didn't make very much money compared to, like, even the, like, young adult romance love triangle stuff, like Hunger Games or The Maze Runner, and some of those others, Divergent, right? It didn't make anywhere near the amount of money, didn't make the splash that those series did. Harry Potter, any of those kind of things made. Not like, they're not even in the same category. Now, I will grant that romance is the number one grossing, as far as sales, genre of written fiction. It's number one, and it's almost double what second place is, which is the crime mystery thriller, the James Patterson type thing. So if you do just want to make some money, I guess, then sure, whatever. I mean, if that's your motivation, the first thing that my advice was that maybe writing's not for you. Because quite honestly, making a lot of money in any form of art doesn't really happen. You're probably not Stephen King or Anne Rice, Suzanne Collins. You're probably not them. And your narrative, like your book, which you're trying to self-publish, self-edit, is probably not going to reach that level. So you're kind of stuck in the Fabio paperback kind of price range, maybe even straight to e-reader range. Like, you're probably not going to reach a lot of money being made with this anyways. So if you're not going to make a lot of money, you might as well love what you've written. And some of them were like, you know what, I do enjoy writing that, and fine, my advice obviously is not for you. Some, like, even body horror and things like that. Like, obviously my advice isn't for you because you're not writing the same thing that others are writing. But if you're in the position that you're just trying to make money, you should probably not be writing, because you're not gonna make money at that. Edgar Allan Poe, Vincent van Gogh proved that, like, and the biggest kind of middle finger to them was that their works finally became profitable after they were dead. So go into something else. Become a nurse, learn how to weld. Like, that'll get, like, you'll pay your bills a lot more efficiently with that than you will trying to put words on a page. If that's number one, you're just trying to pay bills, go do something else, because you're not going to pay bills with this. Because even the paperback romances that sell the most books, with Fabio on the cover or whatever, those don't make anyone money. They're syndicated. Most of them have pseudonyms and kind of syndicated fake authors or pen names that are attached, that they're written by tons of people, and you might get one of them in there, sure, but they're dime a dozen, and you're going to make like maybe $10 per word on them. So compared to what you might expect or you would need. So, and last is this. Narrative is important. Tell the good story. If you tell a good story that doesn't have seamy sex, people will still buy it. But if your narrative is just a distraction for some getting to the sex that they want, then they're probably not interested in what you have to say as an artist and as whatever your message is. So, and let me kind of summarize it with this, that Frank Turek, if you don't know who that is, he's a Christian apologist, kind of a popularizer. The crossexamined.org talks about like Christian philosophy and he's written a lot of books about that. And you can disagree with him kind of philosophically, and maybe you're not a theist per se, but one thing I don't think that you can argue with him about, that he says a lot, is that we have a cult or religion of sex in today's society, that they're obsessed with it. Not any more than any previous society, sure, but it manifests in a very different way. In Ephesus, for instance, first century, they had the Temple of Artemis, where people would go to worship the goddess Artemis, goddess of the hunt and fertility. And the way they would do that is by paying a prostitute for sex, and that was their expression of worship. They wouldn't sing songs or like kind of repeat liturgies or things like that, like Christians do now. So that's what they would do, and they were so entrenched in the idea of doing so that there was a tunnel from the Temple of Artemis to the library in town, that men would go to the library and then they would use the tunnel to get into the temple, and then while their wives, sisters, daughters, mothers were thinking that they were studying and hitting the books, they were actually hitting something else instead. That their interaction with this love of sex that they had was primarily physical, as an expression of spiritualism. Whereas here in today's society, our primary expression of sex, or of the obsession that our society has with sex, is mental and artificial. Not a lot of people are going to be seeing like a sexually charged ad of Axe body spray, for instance, maybe, or whatever, herbal essences. I'm not going to see that ad and then be inspired to then get in their car, drive down to the end of a dock somewhere, and pay a prostitute for sex. Most people are not going to do that. What they're actually going to do is they're going to get onto any number of websites, and they're going to, in their mind, solicit a woman for sex that has put herself out there onto the internet, often against her will, and that's like, it's imaginary. They're going to solicit an imaginary interaction with another person. Maybe even, like, my wife just created a artist profile because she's trying to write. She's trying to get into writing, get published, and that's made it like immediately, as soon as she created this new profile for her expressed art, she started getting nude requests from adult men in even other parts of the world. It's really weird, but because we're obsessed with sex. And as soon, my wife, when she read the post over my shoulder as I was typing it, she's like, be careful, like, don't be surprised if they remove you from that group, which they have not done, but if they remove you from that group for attacking their idol of sex. And that's what we have. Like, people were very upset with the idea, even threatened by the idea, that anything other than sex could sell a piece of literature. They were threatened by the idea that a person would want to consume something other than sex in fiction, because we're so inundated with that mindset, that idea that just sex is everywhere and we need to try to compete with it that way. Even pastors feel pressured to do this, where they need to do sermons that are sexually charged or that talk about sexual issues, because that, like, you will fill a large auditorium with that kind of subject content that you wouldn't be able to do just talking about the 5 solas. So welcome to, I guess, your, like, evidence of your new cult. And it's not, I mean, not that it's new, but it's just this new way of expressing this new cult of sex in today's society. And I would really encourage you, if you are a writer, if you are an author, if you are any kind of an artist, to defy that expectation of taking your clothes off or taking the clothes off of your protagonists, the characters you're portraying, of defying that premise of that expectation and doing something original, creative, that will last for a little while longer than the few minutes it takes to click in and out of a explicit window.